Anytime you have questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat box so you don't forget them. Your chat box may be at the top or bottom of your Zoom screen, depending on your device. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout the presentation. We'll take a 5-minute break around 10 a.m. Questions in the chat box will be answered just after the break and again at the end of the presentation. Hopefully we'll have time at the end to answer live questions. If you haven't had time to pick up your packet at the community center, please let us know in the chat box and we'll have one for you at the desk next week. And now here's Jamie.
Hello, I'm Jamie Brown. I've been a master gardener since 2019, so I'm a newbie, but I'm having fun and I'm learning a lot and I'm happy to be here today and I hope I can learn along with you. And I have a cooking class that's coming up in March, the first week of March, and I'm going to do cooking with fresh herbs and I already have 2 of my recipes. I'm doing a minestrone and I'm doing an appetizer and I'm still working on the 3rd recipe, but I'd love to see you there. Thank you.
All right, how are we on sound? Megan, if you could unmute and tell us how we're doing.
Sounds great.
Okay. All right, I am Jennifer Clommer, and I have the wrong slideshow up here. I apologize, we're gonna take a break. All right, I am ready to fly. Are you hearing me? I think we got the right slit. I apologize for the technical difficulties here. I think we're a go. Welcome today to Vegetable Garden Planning for Beginners. It's awesome to be here on a January kind of cold day and be dreaming about what we can be doing in the future in our vegetable gardens. Oh, this is so sensitive, I don't know. Megan, help, I don't know why this is doing this.
Are you just pressing the space bar, or what are you pressing?
I was pressing the arrow. Do I need to press just the space bar? Look what it likes, when I hit the space bar, it does like 10 slides.
Okay.
I don't know why. I wanted to use my own, yeah, anyway. All right.
You could use the now flip.
I apologize. I thought we had this all down. I'm gonna have to do it off my own computer. I'm gonna mute myself.
Would it work if you just left this screen up?
Okay, you guys, we're gonna have to go with the smaller screen version. I can control it for some reason better on this version. All right, whew. Okay, we're there. So if you picked up the packet like Cheryl described, there are a number of things here. You'll want to have these items handy at your fingertips because we will be using them. This is really a hands-on thing. So I'll have my little packet information as well, and we'll fly from here. So the first thing you'll want to pull out is what's on the left-hand side here, this outline, and you're going to be filling in the blanks as we go. So we'll all keep alert and on target when we follow the numbers and the tips for success. Cheryl described our agenda, so I'm not going to get into that too much. There is a break in the middle, so we're targeting that 10 a.m. break. So my passion really is growing vegetables. My first garden was in the first home we had in Salem, and there were 3 raised beds and a compost bin. And I have to say that was one of my most memorable birthday presents was that compost bin. So I've been gardening and raising vegetables for a long time. The bulk of my experience comes from the Giving Garden, which is at Shepherd of the Valley Lutheran Church over on Highland and, on Walnut and Highland. And there are 31 raised beds, an orchard, a small greenhouse, and the main mission there is to raise produce to donate to local food banks. So over the years, we typically donate about 1,200 pounds of produce. That's our average. I did Master Gardener training in 2011, and through Master Gardeners have taught seed to supper classes, Kids Grow, and I am also a 4-H leader, and I do the horticulture portion of the 4-H, and I have a co-leader that does beekeeping. So I've learned a lot about raising different plants that will attract bees with pollen and nectar as well. So a lot of the materials you'll see today are based on the Seed to Supper courses, and Cheryl is a co-leader with our community garden education team, and that team does have Seed to Supper classes, and the last 2 years we've had Seed to Supper at home, so it's a virtual class similar to what you have today, and hopefully we'll be offering that class again through the OSU Extension this spring, early spring, so it's generally an early class. So watch for more details at OSU Extension if you want to get a similar class but on an expanded level. Typically there are 4 classes, 2 hours apiece. Here's a picture of the Giving Garden at Shepherd of the Valley, and you can see many of the raised beds here. There's the greenhouse over here and sheds and berries on the north edge. And from the opposite corner, I'm standing over by the sheds for this picture. You can see here we're doing cover crops, so this I just took yesterday. All right, this is your chance, audience. We're gonna try to make sure that we can see if you can respond to us. It's always hard virtually, so raise your hand if 2022 will be the first time to grow vegetables. So Cheryl, if you can unmute and tell people how to find the raise hand thing.
Okay. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see action. And there's a raise hand button. And I'll look at that.
All right, Cheryl, how many people do we have as brand new gardeners to 2022?
I see 4.
All right, good. So that means, how many participants do we have total?
16.
16, all right, so a quarter of the people are brand new. So I love that, because that's what this course is all about, is brand new gardeners. So we're on a beginning slope. So this is your chance to weigh in. Again, we're testing our Zoom response and making sure that people can use chat. And put in your chat, why are you interested in vegetable garden planning? And Cheryl, can you describe how to do chat?
First, Jennifer, turn off your mic. Okay. So at the bottom of your screen is the chat button, and you can type right in there. Some people have, Alicia has told us that she's been gardening for a while, but she wants to do it better, which I think we all do. Let's see, some of the answers are, why are you interested? Self-sufficiency, to be a good steward and community member, eating healthy with a young baby at home, food to eat, somebody wants to know how to water, want to make good use of my space, enjoy watching plants grow. I love this one, for fun. Somebody's tried, because that's why I do it, for fun. Somebody's tried, Paul has tried, oh, I can't call Paul out, so I can't tell you what he said, but he needs help. Julie is new to Oregon, and she's hopeful that she'll be able to learn to grow some fresh vegetables. Welcome, Julie. I think that's it, Jennifer.
All right, thank you. I love those responses. Some of the things that I look for when I'm making a garden plan is increasing harvest. Of course, that's my goal in running a food bank kind of garden, and also better quality crops. If I make a plan and don't overcrowd things, I'm going to get better quality. So that's a part of more efficient use of space, growing healthier, happy plants, eating more from my garden, and extending the harvest season. So that's something I have learned over the years, is how to use my space for more than just the summer garden. So we'll get into that at the end too. Thank you for your participation. So the bulk of this is going to be 10 steps to creating a garden plan. So you can again monitor wend your way through the presentation and follow on the outline. The most important thing in planning a garden is to evaluate the space you have. Plants all need sun and water, soil, air, and the nutrients. So the combination of all those inputs are going to be what really contribute to the health and beauty and productivity of your garden. We're not going to get into a lot of the evaluating your space and preparing your space for that today. This is more an emphasis on garden planning. But again, there's a lot of resources on that, and Seed to Supper class is the most awesome. Another consideration is make nectar and pollen available for pollinators so they come. So if you have fruiting crops like tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers, the pollinators will be happy and help you get a wonderful abundance. Location or convenience to where you're going to be preparing the food is super handy. I've often had an herb garden right outside my kitchen door, so I don't even have to put on shoes to go pick herbs. And if you're unfortunate like me and have deer in your neighborhood, that wildlife fencing is going to be super important to have a successful vegetable garden. So number 1 on your outline, 1A, your tip for success: maximize sunlight. The best exposure in any vegetable garden is here, since we're in the northern hemisphere, is going to be south by southwest facing. You really want a minimum of 6 hours of full sun between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. because that's when the sunlight is the strongest. And ideally, again, it's shade-free, so you want to note shade from buildings and fences and plants and trees. So not only do plant material around the edges create shade, but they also create root competition. So you want to be aware of what other large plants are in the area. And drainage, like we said, water is important, not only water for adding water in the summer when you need it, but also for drainage. So a gradual slope is awesome because then you're not getting puddling in your soil. So crops really do appreciate full sun. Fruit making crops, especially those tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, you'll need that full 6 hours. Root crops like beets and carrots, and coles like broccoli and cauliflower don't need as much sunlight. They do best in full sunlight, but they can get away with less sun. Leafy greens like lettuce, spinach, chard will tolerate bright shade. If you do want to do winter gardening, you really need to have a site with full sun, because the sun is so low in the sky and the daylight hours are much shorter in winter. So step 2 in the planning stage is assessing your site. So you can see this is a rough sketch of what the site is, which way is north, where there's bushes, where the house is, where there's sidewalks or other structures that you can't move, and generally where you would want to place your planting. So the planting space is what you're going to want to do to scale. So you can see this is on scale flat. I can't, my mind is blank. You do it to scale, and so you can do it accurately. Two-way tip for success: start small. So if this is your first year for gardening and you're starting from ground zero, you'll really want to have a space that you can experiment with and understand how to do things. This harkens back to the days of the Giving Garden. I was a volunteer there, and I think there was a patch like 50 feet by 50 feet. We hired a guy to come rototill the whole thing, put on a kind of sprinkler. It was a crazy weedy mess. So it was a pretty frustrating, hard path to go. And if we had started smaller, we would have had more success that very first year. So the reason to go with a 4 foot wide is the accessibility to plants. So I'm 5'4". My reach is, a couple feet in. So if it's a 4 foot wide bed, I can reach pretty much to the middle of the bed by standing on the outside of the bed. Now this doesn't mean you have to have walls or anything like that. You can have a slight mounding of soil. But I'm going to try to minimize the soil compaction by not walking on that soil, so that after it's been prepared and dug and amended and all that, I'm going to plant my seeds and try not to walk on it so that the plant roots can grow to their fullest. So again, by starting small, it's a resource management issue. So the garden inputs and your time and money are a factor in this. And if you've never grown a vegetable garden before, you might be surprised about how much those inputs are. So again, starting small can be a real successful way to start. 2B, tip for success: no north. No north is which direction is north, because why? The sun, again, since we're in the northern hemisphere, is on the south side, going from east to west. And so if you have the tallest plants on the north side, the shade from those tallest plants will be falling north. So you can have your shorter plants in front, and they're not going to be shaded out by the tallest plants. You might think about bed orientation too. You can see the long edges going east to west. So you might be constrained in your own yard by which way you place your beds, but east-west beds have been most successful in the Giving Garden. We have both north-south and east-west, and the east-west beds are more successful. Step 3 in the planning process is to prioritize. This is the most important, I think, consideration, because you want to be growing things that you'll eat and you'll love. So what fresh veggies do you and your household enjoy eating? If you don't enjoy eating radishes, you don't need to plant radishes just because they're easy and fast, right? We don't eat radishes in our house. I don't grow radishes. I did several years, and wasted some. Anyway, what crops taste better fresh from the garden? So, if you really like the salad greens that are freshly picked and you wash them and eat them that night, grow salad greens. What grows well in an area, we'll spend a lot of time on the common crop chart and you'll be able to explore what grows well. The things that need a lot of warmth and sun and warm temperatures, you'll have to take stock as to whether they're really appropriate for our area. What produce is difficult to find fresh locally? So one of the things that I'm going to try growing this year are the pea vines. When you go to a Chinese restaurant and you get the stir-fried pea vines with garlic, well, you can't find those locally, and very much. There's one woman who sells them in small quantities at the Wednesday farmers market, but it's not widely available. So I'm going to try growing those today. And then another consideration are what items are expensive to buy or packaged so that food goes to waste. And for me, that's parsley. You buy a bunch of parsley at the store, it's gigantic. I never finish a bunch of parsley. So it seems always sad to me to have to compost that parsley and it came in a plastic bag and throw away the bag and all that. Whereas if I had parsley sitting outside and I could get it, then it feels like, somebody said sustainable. That to me is a much more sustainable path. So in your crop selection, think about what you can use and love. So this economic value of crops was really eye-opening for me a couple years ago. This is on your outline because I just thought this was something to study a bit. So this comes from Steve Solomon, Gardening West of the Cascades. It came out decades ago. You can get it in the library. It's a little bit dated, but this chart I love. So the economic value is keeping your space and time to harvest in mind. So in this chart, the value lessens going from top to bottom, left to right. And vegetables in italics should be avoided by beginners. So the most economically valuable in his list are fresh herbs. And the least value is watermelon. So I think the watermelon is a good visual. Everybody knows large fruit, right? And the vines are immense. And any one plant that you set for a watermelon might produce 4 fruits. So watermelon takes a long time. You plant it in June and you don't get a watermelon maybe till September. So it's taking up the bed the whole summer. It's taking up a large part of the bed. There are only a few fruits. So watermelons are things that I buy at a produce stand because I don't choose to have that space used by watermelon. By the same token, if you absolutely love watermelon and there's specific varieties you would like to try growing and you have the space to dedicate to that, go ahead and try it. The considerations here, like I said, was the cost at the supermarket in the season. If you're only going to eat 2 watermelons all summer, it's probably better to get it at a produce stand. Per square foot yield, again, we'll go back to that fresh herbs parsley example. Parsley you can plant in very early. You can get a transplant and put it out in March or April and it will produce all winter. I have parsley plants that I'm still pulling, even after that big snow, they got smashed to the ground. After the snow melted, the parsley is fine. I'm still using parsley in my soups and salads and everything else. So parsley to me is a very, very high value crop and I always have parsley. And again, as I mentioned with watermelon, how long the vegetable will occupy the space before you can plant something else there. So how long is that being productive? I will say that the ones he puts in italics that are not great for beginners, I think they're fine for beginners. Bulbing onions, peppers, cauliflower, eggplant, I think they're okay if you buy transplants. So if you buy plants that are already started, you're going to have a better measure of success with those plants. But I've grown all of these. All right, so in your packet, you should be able to find the common crop chart. So this comes from the Seed to Supper book. Oh, Jamie, you'll show us the seed to supper but common crop chart. So the seed to supper participant guide, that if you took the class, everybody gets a free guide. And I don't know if you can see it, but that is one of the things that is in this. So this is the most valuable page in this whole class, I think. And we're going to stepwise through this whole chart. Page 13 or 14, depending on what edition you have. So we're going to page through this in minute detail. Oh, audience response. So raise your hand if you think your best site in your space will have less than full sun and is perhaps somewhat shady. All right, Cheryl, what's the tallies looking like?
Over half the people in the class.
Oh, okay. All right, shade is an issue, but I don't want to deter you from growing vegetables, right? There were the list earlier. Well, in this crop chart, you'll see this column, it says some shade okay. So if you have a somewhat shady area, and especially if you're just starting out, start with the plants that say some shade is okay. Start with those leafy greens, those root crops. And if you really, really, really want to grow a tomato or pepper or something, give it the absolute most sun in the spot you have, or consider growing it in a container that you can move to a small spot that might get more full sun. Oh, 3C, we have another tip for success. So you need to turn your page. Limit the number of crops. So limit the number of crops you're going to try. And, 4 to 5 crops will give you a good variety, and it will give you a good experience with a good number of variety. So I'm going to start this whole example. We're going to stay with one theme throughout. We're going to start with a salad garden. So we're going to have lettuce. That's my number one thing. I want fresh salad greens that are ready to pick and beautiful, right? I'm not a very big bag salad person. It depresses me in January when I have to go buy bag lettuce because my lettuce isn't growing in my garden. I want a tomato, a cucumber, basil, and beets. So I want a good variety for a salad garden. My favorite salad ever is beets. I'm looking at Jamie. The roasted beets with feta and walnuts and a vinaigrette. Really? My favorite salad. Oh. Yes. And you can do golden beets or red beets, or we won't get into that. Anyway, I love to cook, I love to eat, so beets, yeah. Oh, we are ready for the garden planting demo. Oh. Jamie, are you ready?
I think so.
All right, here, we'll stretch and flex here. So we'll move the camera.
I'll show them where it's in their thing. This is where it's in the book too.
They don't have that book.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so do you want me to swing the camera? Just
Turn it around.
all right.
Hello, we're gonna kind of do.
Wait, I gotta unshare.
Oh.
How do I make it only full screen? Okay.
So as I'm looking out, if there's anything to add tips, that's fine. with me.
Okay.
Hello, I'm here. I just kind of.
Okay, I'm gonna move it
We
up.
have to kind of put it down here, but on the ground, as you can kind of see back here, this is facing north. I have a little chart here that says north. So I have, my gardens are all facing north, just so you know.
I don't know where this thing is. There it is.
So we're gonna start with my summer garden. Right here is my summer garden. And in my garden here, I have, the red is my tomatoes. And they're over here with a lot of space because you're gonna have to stake them. They're gonna have to be staked up. So they're gonna be over in this corner right here. I wanna make sure they get the sun they need. So there we have my tomatoes. And around them, I have my herbs. I have herbs planted here. These are my, you can have oregano. Oregano is really nice for any kind of Italian food and Hispanic dishes, anything like that. It's really good for that. You have basil, which I love, that can grow. I did try, in my garden, this is a little side thing, Thai basil, and I didn't have as good a luck. But my regular basil, it went clear till October. So I use basil a lot, so I would put basil in here. You could put thyme, you could put oregano, you could put whatever you like to use right here. You also can have along here, since you have space, you could go all the way across and you could have your lettuce over here, because the lettuce can go in March. You don't have to worry about freezing with your lettuce over here. So that can go in right away. Your tomatoes are not going to go in until May after the frost. You don't want those in too early. But you can put your herbs and your lettuces in the front right here, all the way across. And then you can have your beet family, like Jennifer likes her beets. You can have that in the middle. And that's the darker green. I don't know if you can see the dark green. So these are your herbs in your salad. They can go around. And then you have your beet family, and that's the dark green. Okay, and then the yellow at the very back, I don't know if you can see that very well, but the yellow is your cucumber family. Now those are going to have to be staked up. So you're going to have those, if you didn't stake them up, they would take over the space of the beets. But if you stake them up, you can get more bang for your buck out of your garden. And you'll have room so you can put in your, in front of them, you can have your beet family. So there's your whole summer garden. And we talked about just having 5 things. There's your 5 things. So, you can alternate if you want to have, if you do want to try other things, you could try different types of lettuces. You could try your different types of herbs. So that's where you can do your variety. But you do have just 5 main things here. And that's your space. You wouldn't want anything tall. You don't want the tomatoes here. If they get tall, they're going to shade what's here. So you're going to have your tomatoes here. Anything that gets tall. Then these are, if you want to get transplants, we sell them at the Master Gardener sale. This is the kind of container that we sell them in. You can get your tomatoes in this size. You can get your basil, all your herbs, everything in this size right here. I don't know if I can get it. Trying to find the camera.
Yeah, so this is a 4-inch tomato.
Yeah.
And the reason I brought this size is because I was reminded last year with my 4-H kids, one of the kids really got excited about tomatoes. And so he plants with like 4 tomatoes. Okay, the 4-H kids get exactly the size. This is why I have this format. They each get a 4-foot by 6-foot bed in the giving garden. And so the 4-H member planted 4 of these. And this is just a reminder of how cute those little things are in the 4-inch containers. Well, they make immense big shrubby things. So he did not get as much tomato production as he probably would have appreciated. So that's why I brought the little thing, and also to remind you of the Master Gardener plant. That will be the first Saturday in May, so May 7th. We're targeting that this year, hopefully at the fairgrounds, keeping our fingers crossed.
And the plants are beautiful. They're the best plants, and they did better than anything I've ever used from a nursery. So that's just the truth. So.
All right, so somebody in the chat had said, what is the yellow again? And that's the cucumber. So on the plan, we'll step through this plan on paper, where you're going to see this again and again and again. so we'll review that later.
So these are just all the varieties, and these do stay smaller. The basil gets a little bit bigger, but the oregano and the thyme, they're pretty small. Now, if you put rosemary in, you're gonna have, that thing goes. Rosemary gets really big. So I would plant the smaller herbs here and maybe the rosemary in a container, just so you have a little bit of, save your space, because you really wanna maximize what you have here. So that's your summer garden.
You wanna go to the other gardens or do you do questions or?
Okay. So in this felt garden, there are a lot of options in this exercise. So we used the first 4 with the light green lettuce and herbs, the red, the tomato, the dark green, the spinach, the beets, and the cucumbers in yellow. So as Jamie described, the tall crops are on the north side, north and west. The other tallish things, now cucumbers, if you let them vine all over the ground, they're not tall, but they are the largest footprint ones. So that's why consider using a trellis unless you have a big space. Short crops, like she described, are a lettuce goes in front, and the medium crops are in front of the tomatoes, and the rest of the things go in between the beets. All right. Oh, we're running nicely here on time. Cheryl had said 10 o'clock, but we're gonna take a break now because this is a good break in our flow of things. Please put your questions in the chat, and Cheryl will collate them, and we'll answer questions right after break. Then we'll get into the paper planning part. Cheryl,
Jennifer?
yeah, you have comments.
Would you mute for a minute? If you don't, we don't have any questions in the chat yet. And if this were, let's see, this is a joke, but I will be calling on you by name if you do not. Oh, good, we have a question. Thank you, Alice. Please be thinking of your questions, and we'll be back at 9:46. See you then. And we're back. Jennifer? Anybody?
Yes, we're back. All right, Cheryl, what questions do we have in chat?
Okay, well, I think mute. My threat worked, and we have lots of questions. So here's the first one. On the Alicia wants to know, on the common crop chart, what does it mean by single or 2-week succession?
All right, Alicia, we are going to be talking about 2-week succession a little bit later. So thank you. I'm so glad you're looking at the crop charts and taking this in. We're going to go stepwise and we'll hit that.
Okay, Katie wants to know, oh, this is my favorite question. What crops are suitable or best suited for container gardens? Take it away, Jennifer.
So we do have a container workshop. I don't know if we'll have that this year because that topic is a big topic. But generally, the plants that are more compact and have smaller roots are going to be the ones that are best for containers. In general, this chart does not have containers on here, but things like peppers are awesome in containers because they like the heat and they don't get giant. They're generally about 3 feet tall. And most varieties of things you can find that say compact or good for containers. So if you're reading your tags and see envelopes, we'll get into that more later. We can do that. But Cheryl, can you make a note? We can follow this up and we will send a list of container worthy plants because we do have a 1-page handout we can do.
Got it. Will do. And I'll just make a plug for the Master Gardener plant sale that last year we offered quite a few plants for container gardening and I used them and they were very successful. So Katie, watch for that, the Master Gardener plant sale, hopefully the first Saturday in May. Our next question is from Joan. In your felt garden, how many tomato plants should have gone into that red area?
That's the best question. 1.
Okay.
1. Okay, look, I'm going to turn the next slide that I forgot to change it. Questions from chat. Okay, you can see this is a bed. This is a 12-foot long bed, right? So each 4-H kid gets half a bed. So 4 foot by 6 foot is what it is. You can see here that they're so huge, you can't even tell. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there's 6 tomatoes in a 12-foot stretch. And you can see they're totally touching each other and massive. So 1. Again, this is managing your resources. So if you only have a 4 foot by 6 foot area and you want to grow a bunch of salad things, that's great. If you have a 4 foot by 6 foot area and you're only going to be growing tomatoes, you could probably fit 3. So yeah, this is prioritize.
This is why Jennifer showed you the 4-inch pot. That was one plant from a 4-inch pot in that whole area. Okay, Megan. Megan's vegetables start off great and often stop growing at a point before producing fruit or vegetables. Any suggestions?
All right, I guess I have a few clarifying questions. So Megan, are the plants green and healthy looking and they just don't produce fruit? Sometimes. All right, just off the top of my head, so this is also a pitch for Master Gardeners. There are 2 forums you could ask questions like this during the season. One is called Ask an Expert, and that's all online. And then there's a plant clinic desk at the Benton County OSU Extension Office. And you can take pictures and send in pictures and say, what's wrong with my plant? Why are there no flowers on here? Why are my tomatoes have weird things going on with them? Anyway, so there are resources during the growing season that you can ask this. Megan, in general, if things start slowing down and just seem to come to a halt, even though they've gotten a good start, so I'm thinking they've gotten past the transplant shock. Like there's always a couple weeks after you transplant something and put it into the ground, it just sits there. But if it's gone past that, I would imagine that you need to add nitrogen. So if it's a green leafy crop, the bigger the leaves, the more nitrogen it needs. So I'm thinking broccoli and cauliflower and those kind of crops, they really, really need a lot of fertilizer. Another resource is the seed packets often have fertilizer information, and also in the territorial seed catalog, I'll show you later, there's some growing information there. So I'm guessing nutrients.
Okay. Alicia, the mute. Alicia wants to know, says, can you explain the different planting methods, transplant, row, banded, hill?
Yes, on your crop chart, we'll get into this in a little bit also, but for our discussion today, wherever it says row or banded or hill, I'm going to just say for today's lesson, we're talking about direct seeding. So it's, I'm going to only go planting method, either direct seeding or transplanting. So row or banded and all those things, I honestly don't use personally. I just go by spacing that is on the envelope, the seed envelopes, or in the seed catalogs. So yeah, I don't use those very often. So sorry, that's not very helpful, but yeah, I don't use them. They're in the Acetus Supper. That's their standard nomenclature they use, and there's some charts. I'll try to look that up in a little bit, and I'll put it up on there.
Okay, Rebecca says, what should you enrich the soil with if you have been growing plants for over 5 years?
Excellent question. So James Cassidy is, I don't know what his official title is, but he's a soil scientist at Oregon State University. And 2 years ago, I heard him speak on soil nutrition. And if you have been gardening there for a while, the studies have shown that, so the 3 main elements are nitrogen, potassium, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. I always get those P's mixed up. So NPK. So on a fertilizer bag, you'll see those 3 numbers. Something like Osmocote might be 16, 16, 16. So it means it has high levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And that's what you go by. So in gardens that have been established for a while, that get regular compost and regular fertilizer and things like that, what James Cassidy was purporting and what his studies show is that in home gardens, often there's plenty of phosphorus and potassium in the soil. So if you were to get a soil test, and you can get a list from the OSU Extension Master Gardener Office, and I'm going to do this year because I haven't tested in a while. He said generally you only need to be adding nitrogen. So when another resource, and this would be in your resource guide, the white book. So Jamie, can you show me the resource guide? So in the resource guide, there I think is the soil amendment sale, and that is happening right now. It's a little bit geared towards large scale. Oh, maybe I don't have it there. Sorry. Large scale, so you can buy fertilizers like the one I have been buying for the Giving Garden with just nitrogen or mainly nitrogen is feather meal. And another one, if you prefer to go vegan, is the alfalfa meal. But again, those are 40-pound bags that are like $25, but it lasts as long as you keep it dry and in kind of a cool condition. So mine stays inside in a shed thing in a plastic container, so it always is dry. I can get those nitrogen boosts for the gardens and not be adding more potassium and phosphorus.
Okay, just a reminder for anyone who didn't pick up a packet already at the community center, if you will put a message in the chat, I'll take your name down and we'll make sure that you can pick one up next week when they're open. Our next question comes from Chris, who says, I'm planting dwarf fruit trees and I'm wondering how much space to allow around the trees for planting a veggie garden. The veggies would be on the north side of the trees in a large space.
So I am not as familiar with doing orchard plants. I do have an orchard. There is an orchard with 12 fruit trees in the Giving Garden, and they are on the south side of the garden beds. And those are not on dwarf stock. They are on semi-dwarf stock. So we did 15-foot spacing on those because we wanted to be able to drive a tractor around them to mow periodically over the season. You'll have to look up the spacing for dwarf rootstock. It would be significantly less than 15 feet. And with dwarf stock, if you're pruning and keeping, you'll need to keep them pruned down. It's nice because then you know you can always reach them without using a ladder, and that's my goal too. But you would have to look at spacing between the. This is not scientific. I think you would need at least 10 feet. And I don't know if you have a slope. Our slope at the Giving Garden is slightly sloped, so those fruit trees don't shade out the beds at all. I'm sorry I can't give you a more precise answer. I'm not as familiar with that.
Okay. Catherine is like me and says, if you don't like beets, is there something that would grow well? Stop laughing, Jennifer. Is there something that would grow well in that area, in the felt game that we just saw?
I love that question. Okay, so my husband really doesn't like beets either. But I love beets, and I love them because you can also use the leaves for salad greens. So if we go down our common crop chart, other things, there's tons of other things you can plant in there. So what you would want to do is to make sure that you're not putting anything else tall in front of your cucumbers, right? And if you do, then you need to move the cucumbers. But the beets there, you will just go down. Look at height. Okay, we already have basil. You could put in snap beans. So the pole beans you wouldn't want to put in there because it's tall. You could put in broccoli or cabbage. Carrots would be okay. I would probably move my lettuce back and put the carrots in front because carrots take a long time to germinate. Cauliflower, chard, collard. Yeah, if you don't like beets, you probably don't like collard greens either. Spinach, yep. Eggplants, kale, leeks, onions, parsnips. Okay. Rutabagas, I lied to you guys. I said I've grown everything on that Steve Solomon list. I haven't grown rutabagas. I have grown parsnips. Peas are kind of iffy again because we'll talk about peas later in extending your garden harvest. But peas are going to, depending on the variety you want, they would probably want a trellis there too. Peppers would be fine in that space. Radishes I would move in front of the lettuces because they're shorter than lettuces. Spinach we mentioned earlier. Yeah, so a lot of things can grow in that space if you don't like beets. Later, if we have time, we'll actually have you guys sit and write out a crop chart and fill out your worksheet. So the worksheet we have here is really an exercise for you to do. And like I said, if we have time, we'll just have open fill out the worksheet, and you guys can be asking questions as you do that. So that will be at the very end, because if you need to leave and go, you can do that. But if we have time, I'd really, really like to do that.
Okay, Jennifer to Jennifer. How far away do non-companion plants need to be for growing?
I'm not sure what non-companion means. In general, the spacing between plants is going to be determined by the specific variety you have on your seed packet. So we'll talk about that in the next half also. And that goes for companion plants like flowers and marigolds and other pollinator stuff, as well as vegetables. So that holds for any plantings.
Okay, Fedis, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, says the space I have for gardening, aside from containers, goes under a fence, with the soil on the other side being the same size as it is on my side to be used by the unit behind mine. Is there a good way to ensure whatever I plant doesn't root into their area and risk damaging everything they have planted?
So you're a very thoughtful neighbor. Not everybody would necessarily think of that. So in general, our vegetables are annual crops. So all of these things, most of these things, not all of them, most of these things on this list are annuals. So that annual means that they die back every year. So they're dying back to the ground. Jamie mentioned early, maybe you want to plant a rosemary herb plant. Those get bigger. Maybe you wouldn't want to put this in the plot. And that's an example of a perennial woody shrub-like thing. So I probably, along that fence line, I'm not going to plant probably anything that's a perennial that's going to come back year after year after year, and the root system gets bigger as it goes, right? So I'm probably not going to plant, I mean, this is not our topic today. Our topic is primarily, annual vegetables. But I'm probably not going to plant my raspberries along that fence line. I'm not going to plant blackberries along that fence line, because those they won't go. I'm not going to plant my kiwi vines or grapevines or anything like that, because those are perennials. They stay there. They grow for years and years and years, and their root system will expand, expand, expand. So yes, very thoughtful neighbor. That's an excellent consideration. But in general, these crops do not become established and rampant and spread because they die back every year.
Okay, Susan says, can you please talk about the best soil choices for new beds and fertilizers throughout the seasons?
So the soil, if you're starting out with brand new beds and are importing soil, so there's two ways to look at this. You can dig out pathways. Again, in seed separate classes, they spend a little more time on this. But you can dig out pathways, put the soil from the path into the middle. So like if I'm looking at this tomato picture, I take and pretend like there's no structure there, right? I'm just going to scrape up the soil and mound it on there, and I'm going to amend it with organic compost, like leaves that you can get, by just raking up your leaves. Mind you, we have to be careful when you get leaves from like the city or any other place, because you don't know what other seeds are in there. Like my Japanese maples and some of my neighbors' trees, they do profuse amounts of seeds, so be careful on organic matter. But organic matter and general purpose fertilizers, I tend to use organic fertilizers that are made from organic materials. So they might have fish, they might have kelp, they might have other things in there. So I tend not to use the chemical stuff. The time I use chemical things is really in the containers. So containers, I like to use the pellets that are slow release. So something like Osmocote or something like that, because they're getting water every day, and the fertilizer just leaches out. So, but in the garden that's flush to the soil like that, I tend to use the organic stuff. And again, I'm going to say the amendment sale through Oregon Tilth is the one. Cheryl, can you write that down that we send the link?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to get a drink. So soil mixes, if you need to import soil because you're doing a raised bed, you can ask specifically from the vendors. Again, some of them are in the resource guide. The ones we've used at the Giving Garden is from U&D Nursery in Albany. And we just say, you tell them, I'm doing a vegetable garden, it's a raised bed, I want a pretty rich mix, I want a lot of compost, and I want it, then you can calculate out how much you need, and they deliver it. So you want a loam mix that has compost in it. But it's best to talk to the people there and go out and look at the pile. Don't just blindly say, I want something and have it delivered. You want to go to the place and look at the pile of what you're going to get, because you don't want surprises.
Because sometimes there are surprises. Okay. Does everybody see that Jennifer laughs with her whole body? I love that. Okay. So Karen says, what if you have too much nitrogen in one bed? Last year, our cosmos grew very tall and did not flower. We had a sewer leak for many years before fixing.
Interesting. I have never heard that. So one of the 4-H kids did grow cosmos in her bed, and they got immense. I mean, they were like, I don't know, 5 feet tall cosmos. But hers did flower. I think you're just going to plant high nitrogen crops in there, like your cole crops, like broccolis and salad greens and things like that, in that richest area. And yeah, because if you planted a tomato there, I don't know, I would experiment, because tomatoes are pretty heavy feeders. Corn is a pretty heavy feeder as well. But you could see if the tomatoes would set fruit. And I would probably choose a variety that has a smaller fruit instead of a giant fruit, just to so you know what's happening there. Yeah, I haven't, that might be worth a little more research, and we can look into that more. That's an interesting situation.
Okay, Chris wants to know about that amendment sale from Oregon Tilt, and I'm going to, when we finish the chat, I'll research that and put the link in the chat. And first, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who asked a question so that I didn't have to browbeat you. That's really good. We always worry that no one will ask a question. So you guys are great. Our last question for this part comes from Jennifer. How deep soil amendment? Something's happening here. How deep does soil amendment need to be to grow a garden? We live in a valley with tons of clay. My loamy soil is about 6 inches deep before it hits clay. Is this sufficient, or does it need to be deeper?
I think everybody has clay. I don't know. Clay is like, whoa. So in my home yard, I have really bad clay. And it's a hill, so it's a double whammy, right? So I actually built a trellis thing. I mean, not trellis, terrace thing with cement blocks. The goal is to have at least 12 inches. So if, Jennifer, you can raise your soil level by 12 or at least another 6 inches by adding on to what you have, that's going to help the root area. If you look at a side view of you know, how deep roots get in a garden, in loose, fertile thing. Really, like a tomato plant can go several feet deep. The ones you see here in this giving garden, the soil is bad underneath. These are 12-inch tall, these are highway guardrails that have been repurposed. So the guardrails were retired, but we found that they're really good heat sinks. Like since it runs east-west, the south sun is on this all the time. Anyway, so the soil underneath, we dug it all and amended it all before we added in the soil on top, in hopes that we can get a deeper run on that. So one of the cover crops that we plant is a daikon radish. It's supposedly a soil buster root that supposedly goes down, you know, more than 12 inches. I haven't had as much success getting really deep ones, but I hope over time, as we grow those deep rooted crops in the winter, that will improve. So yeah, 12 inches is kind of a minimum. All right, thank you all for your questions. We'll have another series at the end of the session. So as we're going through this next planning stages, I hope you keep putting stuff into the chat. All right, here we are. We just had our break and our chat questions, and we're going to go into the planning paper exercise. So you want to have that sheet in front of you. We're going to step through it. You're not going to write anything in this worksheet part yet, unless you already know what crops you're going to be mapping into your thing. But I'm going to go through the steps using the same salad garden that Jamie demonstrated with the felt, and we'll show you stepwise how you would do that on your own site plan when you have that drawn to scale. So the draft plan, again, we're going to use the common crops chart, and we're going to use this planning worksheet. So the first step, remember, limit the number of crops you have. That's why I only have 5 lines here, because you're going to limit your crops. Jamie was really excited. She sees all these colors and different crops, and she's like, well, we could put in peppers, and we could put in this. And yes, we could do all those things. She's laughing over there. We could do all those things. The possibilities are endless, but we're going to limit ourselves to this exercise for 5, just because it's easier to show planning-wise. So from your common crop chart, you're going to fill in the different columns. So you have your crops written in, you have the planting windows written in. You're going to fill in the footprints, whether you're going to, so remember somebody asked what row and banded in hill means. We're just going to call that direct. Direct versus transplanting. You're going to include the heights and the days to harvest. So once you have that chart filled out, you're going to go to the 4 by 6 foot area, and you're going to note what the scale is. So in this, 1/4 inch square is equal to 3 inches. So 4 squares equals 1 foot. And we're going to put our north, which way is north, so our indicator on that chart, so we know which side we're going to be putting our tall stuff, right? So in your garden, on your site plan, you're going to put what north is. As Jamie did, we're going to plant that 1 tomato in that 3 foot by 3 foot spot, because we filled out our chart. We looked at tomato. You see it's 36 by 36 inches. I know this is hard to read in this format, but you can see it on your chart. Follow on your chart, tomato 36 by 36. It's a transplant. It's tall, 60 to 85 days, full sun only. So that's one plant you're going to put in there first. Next, I'm going to put the next tallest plant. So I'm looking over here, the next tallest and biggest. So I'm looking in the height column. That tomato was said height, tall. And I'm going to go down to the next tallest thing, and that says medium. And it says on that crop chart, cucumber, 6 inch by 6 inch trellised. Well, just from experience, 6 inch from 6 inch, I think is a little too close together. So I'm placing my cucumbers in 1 foot spacings. And I'm going to space them 1 foot apart. And I'm going to put the trellis on the north side. So again, I don't want these cucumbers blocking out the light. And I don't want them sprawling all over the whole bed, because cucumbers, if you let them go, they'll take up this whole side of the bed. So I'm going to trellis them up. Next, I have my tall stuff placed on there. So next I'm going to place the short stuff, because I want those to have the primo sun. So the lettuces are going to go in front, just like Jamie had the lettuces are in front. So again, you can look down your column from your crop chart and see what the dimensions are. So in this crop chart, it says 6 inches by 6 inches, which again, from experience, that's a little bit tight spacing. I like to grow leaf lettuces, and they really benefit. So my hand measure from fingertip to fingertip is 8 inches. I do more of an 8-inch spacing with lettuces, but that's, you'll want to use information from your specific lettuce variety. Some leaf lettuces get very big. Some of the romaines are taller and narrower. So it really depends on what seed you choose. So then you're going to place the other crops in between. Oh, what we didn't explain. When Jamie was placing the squares, she had 3 of the dark green squares for the beets. That doesn't mean 1 beet per square. The tomato meant 1 tomato per square, but on each of those little blocks, you're going to see beets here, it says 4 inches by 4 inches. So on the block it said beets spacing 9 per 1 foot square. So that's why I have 9 beets, 9 beets, 9 beets. So I neglected to say this earlier. So I'm writing down how many I'm doing on each of these things. So 1 tomato, 3 cucumbers, 24 lettuces. Then that was based on the 6-inch spacing for those lettuces, and 27 beets. And moving on to the herbs, I'm doing 1 foot square sections for those herbs. I can fit 3 in. They are of medium height, so they're going to be significantly shorter than tomatoes, so we don't worry about the basils shading the tomatoes. We'd be more worried if we tried to put basils on the north side of the tomatoes. 1 year, so in the Giving Garden, 1 year, we kind of let the sunflowers just grow in an adjacent bed. And I could not figure out why the basil was doing so poorly that year. And these are 4 foot wide pathways, so they're big because we didn't want kids running wheelbarrows. So they're big wide aisles. And I realized, well, the bed adjacent 4 feet away had 6 to 8 foot tall sunflowers in it. It was shading the basil. We had a really poor basil production that year because of the shading. So you definitely, the full sun herbs, you want to have them in full sun. Some of the shadier herbs, like parsley, would have done fine. Parsley and cilantro would have done fine, but the basil, not so much. All right, somebody had the 2-week succession question. So you'll note on your crop chart, again, take a look at the paper copy you have here. So the tomato, down there, it said single. That means I'm only getting, from one plant, from one type and variety, I'm only going to plant 1 tomato once, and that's it for all season. Same with the cucumber. I'm going to plant those cucumbers once, I'm going to have them the whole season. So the ones that say succession in there means that the crop, the days to harvest for that particular crop are short enough that you can get more than 1 crop in a time period, or you can stagger the crops in order to get an extended time to be harvesting. So think about it this way. The lettuce and the beets on that far right column say succession. Okay, if I have 24 lettuce plants, I really can't eat 24 heads of lettuce in 2 weeks. If they all are coming on, they're all going to be primo. We eat a lot of salad, but not that much. So succession planting means that you can have several plantings of the same thing, or maybe different varieties that take longer to grow. So planting one, I'm going to start the middle row, and we'll talk about calendar dates later. But I'm going to start that middle row, and then 2 weeks later, I'm going to put in another row. And in 2 weeks, that first row is barely, they're tiny little mini things, right? Then I'm planting more seeds in the second row. And then 2 weeks after that, so a month after the first one, I'm planting that third row. And the fourth row is 2 weeks after that. And by the time this one is 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks out, I'm harvesting those 6. So I have 2 weeks to eat 6 heads of lettuce, which is kind of about right for us, honestly. We eat a lot of salads. So then in another 2 weeks, so once those are all harvested, I'm going to replant more lettuce seeds in there. I'm going to take out the roots, replant lettuce seeds, and then I'll go to the next time. I'll be eating off of this crop. So I found that 4 seedings, 2 weeks apart. I mean, you're going to get overlap, obviously, but that for me works really well for lettuce, and we eat a lot. Same thing with the beets. You don't need 27 beets at the same time. Beets hold longer than lettuce does, so beets you have a little more flexibility. I actually don't do succession planting with beets. This was kind of for an example. I just plant one planting of beets because they come up kind of slow, and I eat the greens all along, and they hold pretty well in the soil. So this is not as relevant for me. I would probably just plant them all at once. But the lettuce really is a good succession planting. I hope that answered the question. So you'll want to pay attention. We put that in the chart in that top part, whether it's going to be direct planted or direct seeded or transplanted. And in general, this is a chart from that Seed to Supper book as well. And you don't need to copy this down because it will always be on your seed packet. But in general, the things you're going to direct seed are the large seeded items like corn, beans, peas, squash, pumpkins, cucumbers, melons, that kind of thing. And sometimes large seed things can be transplanted as well.
You want to show them the seed packet though?
Okay, we'll use this. In general, you're going to direct seed the root crops, and this is even probably more important than the large seed thing. Tap-rooted vegetables are not going to transplant well. I had one of the 4-H kids tried to transplant radishes because they were thinning. Okay, thinning is the other thing, right? They were thinning radishes and tried to move them over and have them grow. Not very successful. So again, once they're established, you want to go, and those thinnings you can use in salads as mini greens or mini radishes or whatever, but they don't transplant well. Other things that are going to be direct are listed here: garlic, potatoes, those kinds of things. The things that you're going to only transplant are mostly those long season, single planted, warmth-loving crops like tomatoes, peppers, tomatillos, both hot and sweet peppers, and eggplant. Hot peppers more so even than the sweet peppers. Hot peppers need a lot of heat and a long time to get good hot peppers. Many crops here locally are easily direct seeded, and those are the ones that say row or banded or hill and on this chart. I would not, okay, I take one correction on your crop chart. I have not had success direct seeding basil. I only transplant basil. There was something else. Oh, 2 things on this chart. Cilantro, it says to transplant. I have not had good luck transplanting cilantro. I only direct seed it because the times I've tried to transplant it, it bolted right away. So I direct seed cilantro, and I think those were the only 2 corrections I have on here. If anybody else has experience too, you can share that in the chat if you.
No, I had the same thing with cilantro.
Cilantro, yeah.
I bolted on me twice, I thought.
Yeah, so Jamie says same thing about cilantro. Direct seed that cilantro. In fact, I direct seeded cilantro. I'm off track. Anyway, I have cilantro that's harvestable now because I direct seeded it in the fall. Or if you're super lazy and just let the things go to seed, they'll come up when they want to if they're a hardy annual. Anyway, sorry, way off track. That was advanced topic. You just got a bonus. Okay, back to those people who raised their hand. If you have shade and it's kind of cold, a tip for success. Okay, we're back to our outline sheet. If your space is cold and shady, use transplants rather than direct sowing seeds. So any of these crops except for cilantro, where it says some shade, okay, you might be better off doing transplant, especially if this is your first foray into garden and you really want to get a successful thing going right off the bat. Transplants are going to do it for you. It's not the most economical choice, but it will be very successful. So nurseries often have things like lettuces and cabbages and things that you can transplant, but you can also grow from seed. So again, if your space is cold and shady, consider transplants and call it an educational expense as you ramp up into your gardening experience. 5A, tip for success. Don't plant too early. Let me say it again. Don't plant too early. So one of the very first seed to supper classes, actually the second seed to supper class we had, it was in February. And sometimes in February we get glorious, beautiful, sunny, warm days and everybody's out gardening and weeding and getting ready and excited. Well, we had the introductory course, and one of the seed to supper class participants came and she was so excited because last weekend she went and planted all her seeds. And all instructors, we just like, in February, it's too cold for the warm season crops. If you look at your crop chart, really the only thing listed to plant in February is peas. And unfortunately, this participant had gone out and bought beans and corns and all kinds of stuff. And she was nearly in tears. She said, I just spent everything, my budget, the allowance for my garden, I just spent it all. Fortunately, we had seeds that we were giving away in that class, and often we do in seed to supper classes. We often have seeds that we give away because we can buy them bulk. So she was rescued by getting more seeds. Don't plant too early. So in Corvallis, our hardiness zone is 8B, and that means that's just a temperature thing. Our lowest temperatures are about 15 to 20 degrees, and I think we hit about that. I don't know, you guys can put in chat what your lowest temperature was back in December. I was actually out of town that week, so I don't know what the lowest temperature was in my plots, but it was significantly below freezing. And that's the biggest freeze we've had so far this season. And generally, once we get to late January, we don't have too many big freezes or big snows like that. So sometimes you'll see plant 4 to 6 weeks before your average last frost. Well, if you're going along and it was frosty yesterday at my house, but how do you know that was the last frost or not? Well, you use the average last frost. So in Corvallis, and you can look this up by zip codes. It's easy to look up on Google. So if you're in an area, if you're in higher areas outside of Philomath or something, you might have a later date than this. But in Corvallis, April 15th is the average last frost. I do keep records on my calendars. I mark them down. When I did this, I didn't look it up for 20 and 21, but in 2019, the last frost was March 27th. So that was a full 2 weeks earlier than average. And the average first frost that year was October 9th, whereas our average is October 15th. And these are easy for me to remember because April 15th is tax day, and I always remember a couple weeks before Halloween. Usually by Halloween we have frost, right? There's some time before Halloween we have a frost. So you can always know, oh, people are getting out those fall decorations. I better be paying attention to the forecast because I want to harvest that last basil before frost because it's going to turn black and be useless. That whole big pesto thing you wanted to make just turned all black. So pay attention to the forecast and what the nighttime cold temperatures are, because it's the nighttime colds that are our limitation here. So from the vegetable planting worksheet, you're going to create a planting calendar. Now in your packet, I put, this was just a calendar-pedia thing. You could put it on your regular calendar. I like to have it on a you can print it on one sheet. Mine is on two for layout purposes. It was easier for me to write in all the dates on 2 sheets. I like to have it on 1 page, and then I write the reminders into, if you're using your phone calendar. I just like the visual of handwritten paper thing. I'm kind of old school that way. It just reminds me, if I can look at this, when to do this. So on this sheet, I have the average last frost on April 15th. And on my vegetable garden planting worksheet, it says planting window, March to September. And this one says succession, right? So I'm going to hedge a little bit middle March for my first seeding of lettuce. And I'm going to plant 4 succession plantings, right? So then I'm going to look 2 weeks after that, Thursday the 17th, and I'm going to put my second seeding in on the 31st of March. And I'm going to put the third seeding in on the 14th of April, and the last seeding in the most front row into the 28th. Now, of course, I don't get out to the garden every Thursday, every 2 weeks, but I know that that week is my target. And so I'll have it on my calendar, seed lettuce. And so then I'll remember to take out that seed packet and put it on the counter, so I'll remember to go out there and do it. Same thing with beets. If you were going to succession plant, these are a little further apart than lettuce because beets do hold well in the garden. And I don't use beets as fast as I do lettuce. So that was that direct seeding on here. The rest of the plants are transplants. So I'm going to put into my calendar tomato, May. So I'm going to say purchase tomato plant. And I'm going to make sure that I know when the Master Gardener plant sale is, and if it's actually going to be on May 7th at the fairgrounds, I'm going to go and buy the plants that I want to transplant. So you can buy, okay, this is word of warning. I should put this in as another tip for success. Just because they have tomatoes available in the stores in March doesn't mean you should plant your tomatoes in March. So all the tomatoes you see in the Bi-Mart or Wilco or Home Depot or wherever, they're available very early. But we could still have frost. So if you cannot resist the temptation and buy your tomato, you're going to need to either have a very sunny indoor location for it, or you're going to plant it outside and give it lots of protection and do all the walls and all that stuff. I don't do that. I don't want to worry about my tomato and run out in the middle of the night and put a sheet over it. I just get them in May and plant them in May so I don't have to worry. And I don't have, if I only have a 4x6 plot, I don't want to risk the tomato thing. I might risk lettuces and that they get frozen out and die, but seed packets are cheap. It's, $6 for my whole crop the whole year. So I'm willing to risk seeds more than I am the plants. So the cucumber, it says May to June. Sometimes I'll put out the cucumbers later, but if I've purchased them early in May, I'm going to plant them then. Basil, so basil, in my experience, they can black out if the temperatures are anywhere below 40, so it doesn't even have to reach 32 to get black basil. So I tend to plant the basils later than I do the tomatoes. But it's all on my calendar, so I'll know when the target rates are. And I can tell by my forecasts what things are going to be a week out. So if I buy my plants in early May and it looks like it's going to get really cold, I might bring them in and out, in and out, in and out. So my house has not very good sunlight inside. So I'll put the tomato outside during the day when it's on my deck, when it's really bright. Then I'll bring it in, not actually in my house, I'll put it into the garage because I don't want to bring it to the house because it's too warm in there. So I'll bring it to the garage until it's warm enough and safe enough to plant. All right. So the next step, we've made our calendar, we know when we want to plant, we know when we want to buy them, so now we're ready to purchase those seeds and starts. Certainly seeds keep longer, you can buy your seeds super early, but you're not going to plant them super early, right? I already have my beet seeds and my lettuce seeds, but it's January, it's not my target window, I'm not going to plant them yet, but I can be thinking and dreaming all along. So I already have my seeds, I get those seeds catalogs and I start dog-earing them and highlighting and everything else. So 6A tip for success, make a list. So when you go to that Master Gardener plant sale, you go, oh, this tomato's perfect, I'm gonna get it. You read all the background and then you see 3 more. Stick to your list. Don't buy 3 more, stick to your list. Same thing with the cucumbers and basils. You know, I only have space for 3 cucumbers. I only have space for 3 herbs. And no, they're not going to produce to their biggest potential if I cram 2 more in. They look small, they look cute, but you know, think about what plants need again. They need sunlight, you're going to be blocking sun. They need air, they need the circulation. If you cram more plants in there, they're not going to have the circulation. Think about what they're doing underground. Somebody was asking about how deep they need to go. Think about the root happenings. What's going on there? If you're cramming more plants in, there's competition for sun, there's competition for air, there's competition for root, there's competition for the nutrients in the soil. So stick to the spacing that you planned and what it says on the envelope. Stick to your list. That's your success measure. All right, now is the time when you guys can pull out the seed packets. Everybody got a slight different assortment of seed packets. So we're going to go through and we're going to have a chat. I didn't put that in there. We can have chat questions at the end on lettuces and stuff. I mean on seed envelopes if we have time. So when you look at a seed packet, you're going to see the title, the general lettuce or seed type, which in this case is lettuce. The specific variety, in this case it's a blend. I like to have all different colors of salads, and instead of buying 4 different lettuce packets, I like to buy mixes because they're all built in. So this one has slow bulb, buttercrunch, red sale, salad mold, Belmane. It has 5 different things. So that's why you'll see days from sowing to harvest is a range, is 48 to 56 days because we have a mix of lettuces. All of the seed vendors here in this area sell seeds on the date. But sometimes you come across seeds in different places or people are giving them away for free or whatever. Check what the year was then they were packed. And you can also find on seed packets, sometimes, this is unusual, they don't, a lot of packets don't have this, but Territorial does, the usual seed life. So in this case, lettuce seeds have a 3-year life. So you'll see here, I've handwritten 2021 because that's the package date, and then 3 years. So I can expect year 1 is 2021, year 2 is 2022, year 3 is 2023. So I know how long they're good for. Again, I garden with 4-H kids. I want them to have the biggest chance of success. So I don't keep old seeds around. Personally, I do use old seeds. I just seed more thickly when they're old. And all seed envelopes will have the general planting information, how deep, how far apart to sow. So I generally do not, in this 4 to 6 plot, I don't do just one row down the middle. I'm planting pretty much an array. So in lettuces, I'm planting 8 inches apart, and I'll sprinkle seeds in, and it usually ends up more than one seed in a hole, and I'll have to thin, but generally not too much. I don't like thinning. I don't like throwing away baby plants. How warm the soil needs to be before they sprout. So often seed packets have temperatures, and I know so I definitely have taken my kitchen thermometer outside to measure the soil temperature. And of course, my husband sees me doing this and he's like, what are you doing? And so that's not an ideal use of your kitchen thermometer, but I'm frugal enough, and I know that I don't need a dedicated thermometer for the garden. So this is where the crop chart has done the homework for our area. So I did not say, this common crop chart is really for the Willamette Valley. This will not apply if you live in Eastern Oregon or you live on the coast. The coast is warmer, Eastern and Central Oregon is colder. This common crop chart was designed by by master gardeners in the Portland area. So based on the Portland area, Willamette Valley people can use this common crop chart. So when you're using looking at the soil temperature guides, 40 to 80 degrees, you can just go by the windows that are on this common crop chart. Don't feel compelled to go out and measure the temperature, unless you're just curious and you want to know. Days to germination, that's handy to know, 2 to 15, and I'll often write that on the labels because I don't want to know that something was a failure and I dug it up a week out because I thought they all failed, when indeed it's going to take them at least 2 weeks to come up at all. So germination just means how many days before you actually see leaves above ground. And then spacing between mature plants, you'll see this on our common crop chart, it said 6 inches. Well, this one is saying thin to 10 to 16 inches. So remember my 8-inch plant guide with hand? I'm going to double that, maybe half, double, 10 to 16. So lettuces take up a lot of space. And again, last year we did plant 6-inch spacing on lettuce. We were transplanting them because we had them growing in another place. And the slugs were terrible. So because the airspace and all the plants were so close together, the slugs just swarmed. So it was gross. You don't want to be picking slugs out of your leaf lettuce. I mean, you will have to, but you don't want to have to pick out a bajillion slugs. Yeah. When to start seeds indoors. In general, I'm going to just say starting seeds indoors is a more advanced topic. How the temperatures in your house are perfect for starting seeds indoors. Generally, it's going to be the lighting. In my house, and even with supplemental lighting, plants struggle. So the high level light things like tomatoes and peppers, I have not been able to grow successfully in my house. That's something we need the greenhouse for. I can do lettuces okay. They're a little bit puny and a little bit scrawny, but even the lettuces in my house need supplemental. So again, seeding indoors, I would say, is a more advanced topic, and probably not for first-time gardeners. But if you want to experiment with some seeds because you have the seed packet, I say go for it, right? It's for a few seeds, go. All right, I'm not going to belabor this. So the territorial seed catalogs that you have in your packets, you'll find if you turn to the general pages, they're kind of sort of alphabetical mostly. There's an index in the front cover. There's also a key, a legend for all these little symbols in there, but there's more information. So somebody was asking about fertilizing and different crops need different levels of fertilization. So there's a little bit of information on the seed packets, but there's more information in this particular seed catalog. I keep this in my garden basket all the time because there's more information on there. And all this information they have in the catalogs and on the seed packets, there's other growing things online you can go to on Territorial Seed Company's site. Tip for success, 6A. We're back to our worksheet. I'm going to keep moving along so we can hit the end here. Lettuce, little gem. You'll see that these are both green lettuces. They're not head lettuces. They're kind of leafy. They're either a bib or butter crunches or things like that. But the key thing is, okay, this one says little gem. Little gem is, I think the variety, you know, if you've ever seen in the grocery store, they sell these little heads of lettuce wrapped in plastic containers. It's probably little gem because you can space them apart. But if you look at the number of days, 48 days compared to 75 days, to me in my garden, in my resource limited, time limited garden, I'd rather get this butter crunch variety in 48 days and be able to turn it over and do my succession planning over and over, rather than wait 75 days for little gem, cute as it is. So pay attention to the number of days. Tomatoes, also a number of days thing, but size matters in tomatoes. You're going to get a lot more production-wise from Sun Gold than Brandywine. I have grown Brandywine. They have been 7 inches across, but in my experiences, they don't become ripe until the end of September, and all 7 of the tomatoes, they're not huge producers either. They taste fabulous, but all 7 of them are ready like in the same week. So I personally would rather have a longer season of smaller tomatoes than 7 gigantic tomatoes at the end of the season. So keep that in mind. If you only have space for 1 tomato, what one are you going to choose? Cucumbers. In our example, we were trellising them, and Cheryl referred to the container varieties. Patio Snacker was one of the container varieties that the Master Gardener sold in their plant sale last year. And you can see that when you read into the envelope, the Patio Snacker only has a 24 to 36 inch radius, whereas Marketmore has vines up to 6 feet long. So if you're looking for a container or something that you want to stay smaller and more compact and you don't need big, huge production, Patio Snacker might be a better choice for you than Marketmore. Again, read the labels, read the seed packets. All right, Cheryl, I'm glad I put this slide in. This is where we want to try to do, you talk, Cheryl, I'm going to mute.
Okay. So we're going to want to do a group photo with the seed packets. So you're going to start your videos, please. Start your videos. I'm trying to do this. Jennifer, I think we need to stop. I think you need to stop sharing your screen so that we can see everybody. And we're going to hold up our seed packets. Yeah, so nice to see you. Yeah, look at Megan. Okay, so Julie and Chris and Paul and Catherine. Oh, sorry, Catherine, but we'd like to see your face anyway, even if you don't have a seed packet. Turn on your camera. And somehow I'm going to put my seed packets down and take a photo. It's going to be so exciting. Is everybody smile? Katie, let me see your face. Katie Fuller, I can't see you. I can only see your seed packets. Girl, okay, too bad. Okay, oh, good, I have a kitty. I want to get that kitty again. Shoot. Come on, kitty. Karen, you're doing a great job with that cat. Just a sec. Okay. Alicia, you are so photogenic. Jill, excellent. Oh, the cat is perfect. Vedas is very mysterious. And Joan is waving and Jennifer is waving. I have about 37 photos now. And here's Jamie. Yay! Okay. I think I've had enough fun now. And that's that. Thank you, everybody. It is nice to see. Let me just look at you for a minute. Okay, Jennifer, can we just look at them? Oh, there's the cat. I'm April. Nice to see you. Okay. Oh, Jill, you're so good. Okay, I'm done, Jennifer. I'm done. Susan, nice to see you. I'm done having fun. So we can stop the videos and now.
All right, thanks for the photo op, guys. We like to document the classes we do, and I always forget. That's why I put the slide in there. All right. Oh, we're racing to the end here. So, start planting. Consult your calendar. Tip for success 7A. Label everything. So my favorite labels are cut from yogurt containers. You can write with Sharpie, but if they need to last a long time, pencil works better. I usually write you guys, you think you will remember what it was? You won't remember what it was. And if you deviate from your plan, you might not know what it was. And my garden has lots of weeds in it, so it was sometimes hard to identify at first when I was first starting what was actually what I wanted and what was a weed. So I always put labels in. You put in the variety that it was and the date you planted it. So this is where you might want to put in how many days till germination so that you don't worry. Like if it's 14 days, you're not going to worry on March 25th that you're not seeing anything. But if it's all of a sudden April 5th and you see nothing, you're panicking and you're going to plant more. 7B, this is a bonus tip for success. Stagger your planting seeds. So don't use all your seeds at once. The conditions may improve and increase your likelihood of germination. So remember when we were doing our staggered plantings, if you had started back earlier in March, you don't want to use all your seeds. Just use a few. Just do one row. And then maybe that row dies because it got too cold, but you've continued staggering your succession plantings, and then you'll just go and plant over the top of those that didn't come up. And also, don't feel compelled to use all those seeds. Just because the seeds are there doesn't mean you want to use them. Every single tiny little seed, if you open up your seeds, all those little lettuces, all of them make, and for this one, the 10 to 16 inch spacing. So don't go willy-nilly and sprinkle that whole packet in a row. Don't use all those seeds. There's way more than you would need to eat in one season. Update your planting plan and calendar. So you'll want it once you get your specific seeds, you might want to change the dates on there based on what you see there. And take photos, journal, keep track of your amazing successes and the things that you want to change next year. Keep a recording of that. This is a garden in the Giving Garden. This is Colleen's plot, and you can see she had you don't see her plan there, but you can see there's some lettuces that were direct seeded, some things that were transplanted, some herbs. Tomato is kind of all by itself, so it's not going to be blocking out things. This is one of the 4-H kids, and she had cucumbers seeded on the backside. This is early in the season. You can see the lettuces and the onions that she has going there. All right, in our last few minutes, and I'm sorry we did not time this well to have a lot of time for questions, but I would say I am willing to stay on for extra 10 minutes if people want to do this. But we're going to wrap up with extending your harvest and how you can create spring earlier gardens and later fall gardens. So you saw the summer bounty, and I'm going to turn the camera so you can see Jamie.
Okay, so you saw our, oh, you saw our summer garden right here. I think I'm gonna make sure, see if I can get this to see it, to show it better. Okay, so here's our summer garden. I'm gonna pull that and we're gonna go to the spring garden.
It doesn't show on that right, otherwise. We just need to get in closer.
Okay, so here's our spring garden. These are the things you're gonna be planting earlier. They're not, the frost is not a problem for these crops, so you don't have to worry like you do the tomatoes and things like that. So here you have your salads. So you could have lettuce here, you could have kale here, you could have parsley, basil, anything like that can be planted along here, cilantro. So that's what I have planted right here. It's not gonna be bothered because it's shorter, it's not gonna bother any other plant. It's right here, it doesn't have to worry about, you don't have to cover it with a, any kind of crop cover. You could just plant these and they'll do well. Gotta space them. So you probably have maybe 4 lettuces here. And then in between you might stick something smaller like a basil. The parsley might go here because it might spread just depending on how much you put. And then you're gonna have, you could do a rosemary like here, because, no, you can't, just go to the, okay, so then over here you're gonna have your pea family. These are your pole, things that get taller, you're gonna have to stake these. So you want them here so they don't shade other things, but those can go in early too. And then you're gonna go over here to your beet family. If you don't do beets, you could do spinach, you could do chard, anything else like that here. So there you have, that's your spring garden. Now,
Is everybody still here? Can you guys undo your video so I can see you? Oh, thank you. When Jennifer moved the cart with the camera, she unplugged the computer or the camera, the whatever. So we want to, so we're going to ad lib now, and we want to thank, I'm going to look at all of you because I like to see everybody. I don't see any more questions in the chat, but there are things, if you have questions, you can always contact the Benton County Master Gardeners. We have an email, we have a phone number. When it's possible, we have an in-person desk. If you Google Oregon State Extension Master Gardeners, you can find the information for how to get in touch with us. Does anybody have a question that I'll try to answer, or are we good here? Oh, Paul wants to know if we'll, Jennifer, you're still with me, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, I can talk on speakerphone.
Okay, can you guys hear Jennifer? Yes,
I don't know. Oh, yeah, okay, good.
yeah. So Paul wants to know if we're going to have a recording, and somebody else wanted to know that earlier. And the fact is that we are and have recorded, and it will take some time to edit that video. And then, Jennifer, do you think it will go up on a Master Gardener YouTube?
Yeah, so either it will appear on either Corvallis Community Center website, but we're hoping we'll be able to have it also on the Master Gardener website, and we can send out the link. We'll have Community Center send out the link to everybody.
And if you're interested in becoming a Master Gardener, you can also Google that, Benton County Master Gardener, and we would welcome you because we have a lot of fun. And I'm in this for the fun. Jennifer is in it for the growing plants. And I'm in it for the growing plants too, but it really is fun. And it, you know, failure is a learning experience. Always remember, failure is a learning experience. And if Julie is still here, and I don't know if Julie is still here, I wanted to know where Julie moved from, because my earlier experience gardening was so unlike gardening in the Pacific Northwest. I was just curious. Okay, Jennifer, what else?
All right, well, I have 11:03, so our session is officially complete. So I want to thank everybody for joining in. This has been awesomeness, and I hope that you will all take advantage of doing a little exercise and actually going out there and measuring it and drawing a plan to scale. I think you will get better results that way and a more successful season. But like Cheryl said, we all learn from our experiences, and keep that journal, and the things that were not as successful, perhaps you can apply and ask questions and be able to improve upon that next season. So thank you. And again, I am totally willing to stay on. Cheryl, if
Oh,
you're
yeah.
able to monitor the chat, I'm willing to stay on through 11:15 to answer any other questions that come up.
Okie doke. Alicia says, thank you. I think I have a plan now. I love that. And now I'm going to sneeze, but maybe I'll mute first. Okay, Jill, anybody want to say anything? Jennifer, they're dropping like flies.
All right, good. I think we covered everything.
I think we covered so much. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to end it. And
Okay.
Jennifer, you stay on the phone for a minute, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody. Have a nice Saturday. Bye.
Bye-bye.